is Edward Childs. I lived at 1533 Orchard Avenue, Pleasant Hill.
My name is Elizabeth Spratly Brown, and I lived on live on Clayton Street. But prior to that, I had two other residents in Pleasant Hill. I was born on Woodliff Street, and from a small child up until about age 12, I lived on, it was called Linwood Avenue at that time. It's now called Pursley Street.
My name is Sylvia Williams McGee. I grew up at 248 Pursley Street, which was the same house that Mrs. Brown lived in, and it was Linwood Avenue, but it became Pursley Street.
My name is Marguerite Washington Cooper, and I came to Macon in 1942, and we lived on Fifth Avenue, and we moved from Fifth Avenue to Woodley Street, and that's where I married from.
My name is Loretta Cooper Durham. I lived at 254 Pursley Street.
My name is Helen Taylor Bivens, and I lived at 441. It was Douglas Avenue at the time until they changed it to Walnut Street. I lived with my mother and father. I had three other sisters, was older than me.
What were their names? Mother, father, sister?
My mother was named Mamie Payton Taylor. My daddy was named James Taylor. My older sister was named Mary Louise Taylor, Rosalie Taylor, Ida Taylor.
And what did your parents do? Did mom work out?
My mother worked, she was a maid, yes, she worked. My daddy worked at a textile plant company. No, he was from Hawkinville, no. I was from Mall. It was back.
And what kind of home did you live in? Did they own or rent?
No,
House like?
we rent a house. My mother now, we rent. And it was, I think it was at that time, it was three living room down. Three room when I was small.
Okay, I have one sister and one brother. I live with my parents, Willie Cooper and Marguerite Cooper. To my right.
That's your mother.
That's my mother.
Okay. Siblings?
Siblings were Perry Lee Washington and Ivory Cooper.
And then
When we first came to Macon, we rented a house on Fifth Avenue, and it was right next to Miss Mattie Hubbard Jones, and she ran the playground. And so we moved from there to Woodliff Street, and my parents was buying that. They bought that house, and I had three children. My mother was Perry Lee Knight Washington, and my father was Willie Washington, and we were from Tweeds County. They were from Tweeds County from the beginning.
how old were you when you moved here to Macon?
6. I was 6 years old.
But your brothers and your sister, Don and John, you had some siblings.
Oh,
You had some siblings?
I had a brother and George Washington and Dorothy Washington, and who else was? And John Washington. John was killed in service
In Vietnam.
In
Vietnam.
So it was 4 children, mother and father at home. Mother worked outside of the home?
Yes, she worked at Warner Robins.
Warner-
No, she was at Warner Robins when we came to Macon.
What was she doing in Warner Robins?
I don't know what kind of work she did out there, but she worked for the government.
Government, okay. And then your father
What kind of work? Oh, he worked at chalk mine.
at the
Chalk mine. One of the chalk mine down and
Gordon.
chalk mines, it's like the kaolin mine.
Hale,
Now, where did you work? That wasn't in Macon, was it?
No, it was Twiggs County.
Twiggs County somewhere. Okay.
Okay, I'm Sylvia Williams McGee. My parents came to Macon from Louisville, Georgia. My mother and father came the day they were married to join my grandmother, Emma Atwater, who was already here. She had already migrated. So on the day they married, they came from Louisville, Georgia, stayed with my grandmother for 5 years, and then in 1950, my parents purchased the house 248 Pursley Street. So all three of the Williams children, there were three of us, two boys and a girl. My older brother, John Wayne Williams, I was the middle child, and then Louis Williams. My father was a welder helper. He worked in the steel business, and my mother was a domestic worker. My father bought the house and was just a 3-room shotgun house. And then through the years, he spent his time and with others added rooms onto the house. And so we went from, I think, 3 rooms to having 6 rooms. And then the pride was when he was able to build a double garage in the back and pave that driveway. So we lived at, I married out of the house. My brothers left to go away from that house, and my parents lived in that house until they died. After my mother died in 2008, the house was vacant for almost 5 years. And then a lady who had grown up in Pleasant Hill just out of the blue one day approached me and said she wanted to purchase the house. So we are working with her because that was so important to us. We really had such an attachment to the house. We didn't move my mother's things out. We stayed right there. And so it was just really a blessing when just God's will said, you know, we were led together. So now she is purchasing the house where we grew up. So we hope the legacy will continue. Well, it's interesting that my grandmother really never said why she chose to come to Macon, because all of her siblings either went to Augusta or to Chicago when they migrated. My grandmother was just a little different. So she never really talked about that, but my dad came here because she was here. So we did not have the extended family here like other members had in Augusta or Chicago. So we did not, only for the nuclear family, that was all of us. We just had the nuclear family here. Mm-hmm.
As a small child, I was raised on Linwood Avenue, which was as Sylvia in the same house there with my mother and my stepfather and my grandmother. And my mother had 6 children, and the 3 girls were born in that house on Linwood Avenue. That was Maddie Howard and Clifford Howard, my other 2 sisters. Okay, we moved from there to Clayton Street on the corner. My mother was a domestic worker, and my stepfather, Jesse Howard, and everybody, he was well known in Pleasant Hill, well all around Macon as Tan Tan. Okay, he had his own business. He sold vegetables, anything that you could sell. He sold vegetables on the truck, and then he later had a nightclub downtown where he was killed. I sure don't right offhand, but it was on 5th Street downtown Macon, and that's where he was killed there.
You mentioned that was your stepfather.
Yes.
Biological father?
I was born out of wedlock, and my mother, my father's people lived in East Macon. They were Spradless. They are Spradless, rather. Okay. Oh, my mother did have, like I said, I had the 6 children. My mother had 6 children, and when we moved to Clayton Street, we had 3 boys, and that was Jesse Howard Jr. They called him Lil Tan, Willie Jean Howard, and Jimmy Howard.
So that means
No. 6. It was 6 children. 3 girls and 3 boys.
It was called Linwood Street because the cemetery was is Linmore Cemetery, and so then it was. I don't know what prompted the change from Linwood to Pursley Street.
I was born on Orchard Avenue, but my siblings and they was born on Hazel Street. Myself and my twin brother. I had a twin. He passed away about 5 or 6 years, about 6 years ago. And I was born right in the house at 1533 Orchard Avenue. My father, he worked at Bibb Manufacturing Company for 32 years. And my mother, she worked at the Robert Air Force Base in the kitchen at Robert Air Force Base. My father was named Johnny Childs. My mother was named Eddie Mae Childs. And plus, my grandmother stayed there with us. Her name was Bobby Dillard. And my oldest, I'm the youngest out of 8.
What kind of house was this?
Well, it was let me see, 1, 2, 3 bedroom house, but most of my oldest brothers and my oldest sister, they had moved out. And my oldest brother, he went in the service. Then after he got out the service, he moved to New York, Brooklyn, New York. But my other brother, Marvin, his name was Johnny Jr. Then Marvin, he got married in probably 1950 something. I was little. And my sister Juanita, she got married in 60. And one the only one was left in the house was Carol, Robert, myself, and my twin brother out of 8. So after we all grown up and moved out, the house got torn down. I think it was in 1988, 8 or 9 when the house got torn down.
I am the eldest of 5 children. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Benjamin Sullivan Jr., and I have a sister, Kathy Sullivan Perkins. My oldest brother is Benjamin Sullivan III. My 4th brother is Philip Leon Sullivan, and the baby, of which he doesn't want to be called that anymore, is Anthony Tony Sullivan. And my first experience of living was with my grandparents on Mutual Avenue, 2075 Mutual Avenue in Pleasant Hill. And that was my father's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ben Sullivan Sr. And from birth through 7 years old is where I lived on that street. And that was a house of warmth and security, and I just felt just so good growing up there. And it was 3 bedrooms, kitchen, living room, 1 bath, with my grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Benjamin Sullivan Sr. Her name was Florine. She died in 2005. My granddad died in 1986. And her mother, which is Mrs. Fanny Fitzgerald Smith, lived also on Pursley Street, down at the end of Pursley Street, next to Linwood Cemetery. And then we moved when I was 7 years old, right up the street on the next corner on Penn Street, where my sister was born, Kathy. And then the other 2 brothers, Philip and Tony, were born there. And we all went to L.H. Williams School. We went to Ballard Hudson High School. Then I went to Morris Brown. My brother was born after I came out of Morris Brown. So there's a vast difference of ages in our ages. But we just grew up loving. It was a great neighborhood. Everybody saw about everybody. If you did anything and your parents didn't know it, they were sure to know it when they got home because somebody was going to tell on you. And they kept up with us like that.
My name again is Thomas Mosley. I wasn't born in South, but my parents were. My father lived in Bellevue, and one of my aunts at that time, you've heard of the Mosley Cemetery. At one time they owned that. My grandmother lived over in Tybee, 348 Turpin Street. And my dad used to bring us down, bring 1 or 2 of us. It wasn't that many, but it did finally get to be about 12 of us. So, but anyway, I have always loved Macon, Georgia. I have my roots maybe in Georgia, but I can't be called a rebel. And so these are just some of the things that you will encounter in life. And in 1965, after the war, it was when they closed the base in Middletown Air Depot. I was working at civil service as a sheet metal mechanic. And when they closed that base, 90 bases at one time, one period of time, uh, they gave us the privilege of going to the other five air logistical uh, 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 centers. And so I picked Macon, Georgia, because it kept me in on the East Coast. And so Pleasant Hill, anytime you talked and heard about that, it always raised up ears, you know, when you talk Pleasant Hill, you know, and avenues and rather than just streets and all like that. And it was always a pleasure when I come down and I would go back and give the news, you know, to my friends and my rest of my family. So Pleasant Hill is really a place to really look up into because people made a way. We say later on, in 1965 when they closed the base that I worked in, I then moved to on Third Avenue at 1663 Third Avenue.
Tell me about your house there.
About the house. It was a real nice place there, the Duvals. And, you know, they were people who were, that were prominent. Many of them were school teachers, partial of them. In other words, they always tried to have a good job and represent, you know, us because it was a hard time. And during that time, the children that went to school, it was told into them daily about getting an education and moving yourselves up and belonging to the church, and it did pay off. And of course, in 1940, 42 was when the war, but I was living in Stilton, Pennsylvania at that time. I I moved there after living in Stilton, Pennsylvania. That was 1965.
1965. And how long did you live there?
I lived there until 82,
1982.
and then I moved over into on Fort Hill Street.
Okay, so you moved out of the community
Uh,
during that time.
but we still came over to church during that time.
So you maintained a membership there at the church, which was in Pleasant Hill there.
Right.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Joan Roberts Burney. I grew up on Woodley Street, and my parents, James Hunter Roberts, and my mother, Ruby Washington Roberts. And I grew up in a duplex. My parents migrated to Macon from Tweeds County, which is about 25 miles from Macon. And I think my mom followed her uncle, which was Willie Washington, which is Marguerite Cooper's father. And that was my mom's uncle. And we actually moved in the duplex, which Perry Washington and Willie Washington owned. And we lived actually next door, and we were relatives. And we lived in a 2-bedroom home, and it was 5 children. My sister was the oldest, Brunette Johnson, Brunette Roberts Johnson. My brother Harvey Lee Roberts, and I had twin brothers, which was Johnny Lee Roberts and Lonnie Lee Roberts, and Joan Burney. I was the baby. In my backyard, my father had a garden. He loved gardening, and he also loved cooking as well. And he worked at the box factory here in Macon, Georgia. and my mother was a domestic worker.
So you, as growing up, you remember there being, what kind of things were in this garden? What do you remember?
I remember tomatoes, collard greens, squash, peas, and okra, things like that. Right.
When you were here in Pleasant Hill, tell me about the backyard.
Well, my grandfather had a mule, and he used to go out over out in Bellevue, and they made most of the things that they would have would be tomatoes and okra and cabbage, corn, and in fact, in those years, there most everybody had a garden in their backyard. In fact, during the conversations that I had heard, is people were talking about grass. How are we gonna cut grass when we ain't got nothing to eat? So that's one of the things that they figured out, and every backyard almost had a garden, a small garden, no matter how small it was. But that's the way they thrived. And after going and working out in the fields of wherever they worked at, someone was at home maybe to start the meal, but they would always be, someone would be there to go ahead and start the cooking. And you can imagine working in places from sun up to sundown, and then going home and having to try to get something to eat and get up early in the morning. And there was no transportation like we know it today. They walked 2, 3, 4 miles to work, and when it was over with, they walked back home. So when you really look at the hardships that they have, and we've come along, we've been blessed, and I'm thankful to what my grandparents have done, and they always tried to make something. During that time, one of the things we hadn't talked about, but one of the drinks that they made was that moonshine. And we had a bad habit of trying to keep away from people who did that. And my dad was really, and my mom, they were really a Christian people. And every now and then my dad would maybe sneak and get a little bit of that moonshine, but very rare. And he gave me a taste of it.
I'll
So,
come back to that.
all right.
We're gonna do it afterwards, but I'm gonna come back to that.
Ava Sullivan Davis. I failed to mention that my father, in his first endeavors of working, was a truck driver with a refrigerated truck. It was a florist truck, and it had all these beautiful flowers in it. And it was, I believe, the Schatzman Florist Company in Macon that he drove for until he started a career out at Robins Air Force Base as an expediter, and he was there and retired after 34 years. My mom, Leona Ruth Smith Sullivan, was always a stay-at-home mom. Now, in our backyard at my grandparents' home were chickens. He had a garden where he raised collard greens, and he had a field where he planted corn, and we also had peach trees, and we had strawberries and blackberries. At our house in our backyard, my dad wasn't the type to plant and do, but Mom had a flower garden.
Edward Childs. My backyard we didn't have any garden or anything like that. My grandmother used to get out there and had this big black pot. Used to wash clothes in it and put a little argo starch in it and starch clothes. That's
Why was this pot in your backyard? Explain that to me.
what for washing. If you want to wash some clothes, put starch in you boil them. You boil them. Well, boil them. Had a little fire up on it, and you had we had a wash machine.
When I was born, we didn't have a wash machine.
Yeah, we had a rub bowl.
So you had a pot.
A black pot. Cast
In the
iron.
backyard.
Right.
You put fire in it.
Right.
With the starch in it.
Well, if you want to put, if you want to,
No, the starch
came off the stove, but you can put it in there afterwards. However, I was left.
Let me get this. Those
I was
kids
left.
had washing machines. Who had washing machines? You had a washing machine.
had a Ranger type
A Ranger type.
So you didn't have a pot in the backyard. Who else had pots in the backyard?
We had. We all had pots, but we had a washing machine, a Ranger,
Somebody said you had something else that went with
We
it.
had
a rub bowl, a rub bowl.
that you have to rub with. We had potash soap. They made potash soap back then. And my mom had 3 tubs. We we had 3 tubs out there. Yeah, and
There was a number on it.
yeah. Well, we always there was 3 tubs. You know, you have to wash in one, and then you have the other 2 to rinse the water in. Rinse your clothes in. And you had the big old black pot with the fire on it. And then I remember my mom always had a certain way. You had to hang her sheets on the line and her starch pillowcases. If you did hang the wrong way, she's gonna take them down, make you do it over. And I always remember on Saturday, she was talking about, you better have the high spot and speaking stand. I said, when Saturday come, I used to, oh my God. I used to then hate when Saturday come, cause we had to make sure that we had that house clean. We didn't go nowhere after school. We didn't have nobody coming to the house. And when you do something, she gonna know. She works every day. Whoever told her, she never did tell her. That's one thing about back then. We didn't have problems with, kids like they do today. Cause when we do something wrong, my mother gonna know, and she will whoop you. I remember that I was the baby, and I had it easy though. Cause the oldest 2 was 3 of them. The oldest 2, my mama used to whoop them, and I remember in our kitchen, it used to be like a clothesline. She used to tie them, and that's right. I remember that. I was spoiled, cause my aunt had spoiled me.
Okay, so let me ask. I hear gardens. Who had gardens in the backyard? I hear collard greens. Who had collard greens? Tomatoes. Squash. I heard peas. Chickens. What else? Anything else that I missed that somebody else had in the backyard? Pear tree.
And pecan tree. And pecan. Pecan.
It's not pecan.
It's pecan. Mulberry tree.
Anything else that we missed that you guys had in your backyard? There were fruit trees, there were gardens, there were chickens, there were nuts and fruit. Anything else in your wash pan?
The wash, it was called the wash pot, and with that you had the wash stands, and I guess that was when you would just build that long bench for those 3 tubs to sit on, to stand on, because those tubs that was how you washed twice a week or whatever. And so those tubs were there permanently to sit, so you didn't have to bend over too far. So those tubs were a permanent fixture in the backyard along with the black cast iron pots.
And so there was a bench that was built for them. Tubs to sit on. Number 3 tubs.
Number 3, those were the big size tubs.
Over
You don't know what an outhouse is. That was the bathroom.
Bathroom.
Tell me about this house.
It
Explain this to me.
it sat away from the house, and it was had its own little house, and there was a board with a cutout for you to sit on, and that was it.
I can't remember what year it was, but for a long time, we used to have to bathe in the tin tub. We called it a tub, what you wash it, we had to bathe in the tub. That's what we took a bath in.
There was not plumbing in the house?
No, it wasn't, the bathroom, There wasn't no plumbing in no house back then.
You got the water out of a well.
We did take a bath in the tub. We had to heat the water on the stove and pour it in the tub.
Well, we got all
So-
that. They got through washing.
Say that again.
After they got through washing, they
Take a
a
bath in
the-
that water.
In the same one?
Cause back then, we didn't have
when we were little.
Yeah.
Got this water from where?
Well, there was a spring that we used to go to. Now I lived on Woodley Street, and you'd go down the hill, down, and they have 2 buckets, and that's where you would go get your water. That's from the beginning, but you know, after a while, then we got some
You
more.
called it something else.
The branch.
I've heard that.
The branch.
And you see, you go down there.
To the
there's a
branch,
spring where you get
where
clean water.
was. Yes, ma'am.
And they rerouted that branch under the interstate, I think. Yeah.
So those of you that were educated in Pleasant Hill, tell me what that was like.
Oh, okay. I went to L.H. Williams School. Some of my teachers' name is Johnny Smith, Miss Emma Matt Wilbur, Miss Thompson, Miss Hart was teacher there, Miss Tripp, and they was good teachers. I mean, they always tell you got to get your lesson because you're going to need it when you get in high school and college.
After L.H. Williams,
I went on to Peter G. Appleton. I first went to 8th grade at Ballard Hudson, and then they built Peter G. Appleton across the river. So I finished there at Peter G. Appleton. And then after that, I started working. My mother made me work, made me pay, what you call it? Bowl, pay bowl. Oh, yeah, so I worked. I had to pay at the house. You know, if it ain't up a light bill, water bill, whatever it is, you had to pay something. Board.
okay.
And I remember one time I messed up. My mama put me out. My mother didn't play. She put me out, and I had an aunt named Aunt Jane. I went to her and told her, please ask my mama let me come back. I won't do it no more. She let me back in, and I learned my lesson. I learned my lesson. But my mother was strict. And I proud of her because if she hadn't did the things that taught me and did the things what I supposed to do, I don't tell you what I would have been now. So I appreciate my mother. She's dead and gone, but I appreciate it. But when she got sick from 1980 to 1995, me and my husband, we took care of her. We took care of her. But back then, yes, I went on and finished school, and then after that, I finished school in 62. In 1964, I got married.
Yeah, I went to L.H. Williams, had the same teachers she had. Went on to, when we left Pleasant Hill, went to B.S. Ingram, and I went to Ballard Hudson, graduated. I had a year of business college, and I attended Central Tech, the tech school.
I went to L.H. Williams, and I finished L.H. Williams. I went to, Ballard Hudson for 2 years, but I did not finish school. I went back and had a test and got my GED. Cosmetology.
I went to L.H. Williams. Now, Lewis Henry Williams, that was the name of the school, was named for the principal, longtime principal of the Green Street School. So that school was named, and so all of us went to L.H. Williams. And as she mentioned, I think that the teachers taught generations of us. And I can remember the faculty being pretty stable and very invested in our success, and walking every day from Pursley Street up to L.H. Williams, which was 325 Pursley Street. The original building that we went to school in burned in 1977. So there was just, because the school was the anchor of our community, the school burned, and the Board of Education had plans not to rebuild that school. And everybody rose up, and they had to then make plans to rebuild that school. As a result of rebuilding the school, though, they had to buy that whole block of Pursley Street with 3rd Avenue, 2nd Avenue, to rebuild the school at its current site. But the school, we were all vested in that school and in the memory of that school, till we just would not allow that school to die. I left about L.H. Williams went to Ballard Hudson Junior High School, and then that was right during the time of integration of the Bibb School District. So I left then the segregated school and went to what was then the previously all-white A.L. Miller for girls, and graduated from Miller in 1970, which was the year that all of the schools in Bibb County were desegregated. Then I went on to Tift College, the University of Georgia, and came back to work in the school district and retired from the school district.
I went to L.H. Williams School, and from there I went 1 year was to Old Hudson High, my 8th grade. And from there we went to Ballard Hudson High. I graduated from Ballard Hudson High 1957, a long time. And from there I went to to school at a technical school for LPN training downtown. That was Dudley Hughes. And then I worked at the hospital medical center, and after being there for a while, then I went to Macon State College to graduate from nursing school.
Well, I didn't go to Ellis Williams. I went to Green Street, what is now called Progressive Christian Academy. After graduating from Green Street, I graduated from Peter G. Applin in 1969. And after I finished high school, I worked a year. Then I went I was called into the military in 71. And I did my 2 years. And after I got out the military in 73, I've been working ever since.
I too went to L.H. Williams School and had some of the most marvelous teachers that you would ever want to meet. I mean, they were really ingrained in us, and they taught us just the golden rule, and they could tell you what to do, what not to do, because they could always say, I'm going to call your parents, and you didn't want that. And when that school burned, the citizens, as Sylvia says, they rose up, my parents along with them. They raised money to secure and acquire a lawyer to represent them to get the school bill back. They had sold hot dogs, snowballs, candies, drinks on Saturdays to get the money to hire the attorney to fight for them to get that school back. And then I went to Ballard Hudson Junior High, Ballard Hudson Senior High, graduated, excuse me, in 67, then went off to Morris Brown College, came back home, and then started to work.
As you can see, my sisters and brother here have really history. And of course, when you look at me, now you have to, what I give you is from many years before most of them were born. And so I was there also. I was in World War II with the Marines. And one thing I didn't hear from anybody was the watermelon. The watermelons was the ones that really saved a lot of our people, and just about every place would have some watermelon, and don't forget that old sweet potato. And so these are some of the things that you would encounter. Of course, I went to school in Stilton, Pennsylvania, a little school called Father Gill. And I still remember the 4 teachers there, Miss Gray and Miss Brown and Miss Hemp and Miss Green. They were my favorite teachers, and naturally there it was sort of like integrated. And so therefore it was only maybe 6 of us that went to school at Father Gill. And then they had another one about 2 miles called Hygienic. And then you had your West Side. Now, these are all places that I'm talking about in Stilton, Pennsylvania. And my grandfather lived on Shamrock Road there in Bellevue. So these are just some of the things. And if you keep this open here, we could go all night, really talking about, and maybe with something even new than what has even been said. But number one, at all times, if it wasn't for Jesus Christ, I don't know where we would be. That's the most important thing. You can see a difference in those that did not go and those that did believe in God and belong to the church, to our church. And so I probably would have went to Bellevue Baptist Church if I had have been living down here. But since coming in from Pennsylvania, of course, then we had different schools. And when I came in here in 1966, I
You were a member. Did you come and join New Hope?
yes, from
You've been a member ever since?
ever since. The old standby. I know all the many ministers and everything, and oh man, Bigfoot Hughley and Reverend Jones and Chambers and Chambliss that we have here. And, oh man, oh days. We have had a host of great ministers and everything.
I too also went to L.H. Williams School, and actually, the day that I went to school, first starting out, I wasn't really supposed to go to school, but I was with a aunt that was taking her kids. And because my birthday was December the 31st, they didn't allow you to go to school in September. But this teacher, Miss Thomas, who I admire and adore, she said she's staying in school. She got to stay too. So I started school a little early. And I was very fond of her. And Miss Wilbert, I love her. Sweet. And Miss Lewis, I was crazy about her. And I love Mr. Barnes. Now, Mr. Barnes kind of started me into studying a little harder after I got to the junior school. And I, like, one particular time I made like an A, and he was just passing the room. I wasn't even in his class at that time. And he told me how proud he was of me, and I actually really started studying a little more harder after that. But I love L.H. Williams and love Pleasant Hill. The word pleasant is just what it was. It was sweet.